Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is Discerning What is True. Today is the 13th day, February 2023. I am sharing a particular book that I'm reading online here, but this is the book here, one of the books, Oxytherapy When National Cure for Cancer Became Illegal. You've been lied to all your life about everything, folks, and the doctors in the medical field are no exception. So, this particular chapter I'm going to be reading tonight, and I'm actually Discerning What is True is my channel. I would appreciate if you begin to share these with other people, especially with people who have gastric cancer. I'm not getting anything from this. I just want people to be helped. I want them to be cured. Um, and I believe that this guy did the right thing. He truly was a hero. Um, So after he won his case against Dr. Fishbein and they find out who he is, uh, Dr. Hotze assumes that basically he's going to get a chance to deal with this again in a right way. But that's not going to happen, folks. You see, there are too many people in power who want to destroy him. He's a threat. He's a major threat. So let's get into the reading of the book here. The book chapter is chapter 7. It's called Uncle Sam's Quackdown, a conspiracy against the health of the nation. Flushed with his monumental defeat of the AMA, Hotze was emboldened to knock a second time on the door of the National Cancer Institute in 1950. He submitted 77 case histories, and this time he freely disclosed his formulas since he's been forced to reveal them anyway in the Hirsch trial, though now he hinted they might not be the actual ingredients. I don't know why I say that. Once more, the NCI deemed the records insufficient because many lack biopsies. Hotze's attempt to remedy deficiencies and again supply the names and addresses of institutions and doctors in possession of the biopsies in question, whether the NCI had the authority to obtain. Since Dr. Durkee's arrival 4 years earlier, Hotze was proud of the clinic's greatly improved record keeping. Until only recently, we have not kept scientific records. Hotze complained to the NCI. We could not. We had been hounded from state to state, hunted as we were wild beasts, denied every avenue to properly cooperate and recognition. Hotze had a reason to be optimistic because the NCI had proactively asked him to submit his case history in 1947, 2 years after first rejecting them. It would be appreciated if the same records could be sent to us again for the short time in order that we may permit a number of new people on our staff to review them, the letter stated. What the NCI was not telling him was that his solicitation was prompted by a request for the records by the FDA, you see, Food and Drug Administration, for the federal case it was preparing against him. So now he's going to be dealing with the government. He wasn't dealing with the government in some ways with the AMA, but he's going to be dealing with them. And it's going to have telltale signs of what's happening in the future. When Hotze had last received a reply from NCI Director Dr. J.R. Heller, the Tisch letter indicated that the Agency Review Committee, the omnipotent National Advisory Cancer Council, still found the records inadequate. The NCI was therefore closing its consideration of the case. There would be no government investigation. They wasn't really interested in that, folks. They wanted to see if they could bait him in. So Hotze appealed his predicament to the Surgeon General, Leonard Scheele, Sheele, but the NCI Dr. Gilliam Meadows had already covertly forwarded the new records to the Food and Drug Administration. By November, Hotze was facing federal charges from the FDA for false and misleading labeling of his tonic shipped in interstate commerce. There's the key, folks. They're going to try to get him on something else. In other words, crossing the state lines. So this made it a federal case. That's what they're saying. The Surgeon General therefore responded in view particularly of this litigation. No further statement in this matter appears in order pending the outcome of this litigation. The FDA, through legal legally unable to prevent Hoxsey from operating his clinic, was broadly empowered to stop the interstate shipments of mislabeled medicines. But the government had a problem. Products are shipped virtually without claims. Internal FDA memo admitted. Therefore, the FDA directed the charge at 2 accompanying pamphlets mailed from the clinic that the government case cited as labeling. The brochures portrayed case histories, described the treatment, and carried excerpts of patients' testimony from the hearing with Senator Thomas. Besides the scenes, government strategists had decided that an injunction was a less controversial move than another high-profile criminal court trial. The federal dragnet got underway. Facing an unrelenting series of FDA legal actions, Hoxsey was about to be busier than a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Ironically, FDA Chief Dr. Gordon Granger and his fraud fighters have by now concluded that although originally he doubtless recognized himself as a charlatan, he is now apparently party convinced himself. The FDA sent confiscated samples of Hoxsey's medicine to Dr. Clarence Cook Little at Bar Harbor Laboratory for animal testing. The company letter reminded him of the negative results of his prior 1935 test results in the AMA journal. The agency withheld a list of ingredients, explicitly to avoid any accusations that you were biased by reason of your knowledge of the composition of the preparation. The FDA simultaneously informed the supposedly unbiased researcher that its purpose is to terminate, within the provisions of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the illegal shipment of this material in interstate commerce. It didn't take readings between the lines to get to the gist. Since Dr. Little had already had an ugly run-in with Hoxsey, his objective was compromised in the first place, nor had the eminent cancer research scientist's career been progressively smoothly of late. He had been unceremoniously relieved of his prestigious position at the American Cancer Society, and was now working as a tobacco lobbyist as well as a medical researcher. Under the circumstances, it was highly unlikely that he was going to rock the FDA boat. The case came to trial in November 1950 in the U.S. District Court in Texas before the same judge, Judge William Atwell. This time, the Hoxsey tonic was unavoidable on trial, and the government was set on using the courts to eliminate it from interstate commerce. Again, Hoxsey faced off against the aristocrats of American medicine. The doctor just testified that his medicine couldn't have any positive effects on cancer and might make it worse. Dr. Little's latest negative findings were introduced as evidence. Bolstered by the testimony of prominent physicians, the government asserted that the only acceptable method for treating cancer was surgery and radiation. Folks, you got to understand there's a presupposition here. They're not looking at anything that can cure anything. They're looking at it in a medical perspective. So what they're doing is simply they're making a presupposition that they presuppose that they know what they're talking about, but they're not interested in getting to the truth. You see, among those testifying was Dr. Gillinson Meadows, Chief of Technical Services at NCI, who reiterated the agency's position that Hoxsey's submission to the agency did not meet its most basic criteria for a test. How do we know these tests were this way? You see, did they just simply do that? But anyway, let's just continue. However, under cross-examination, Dr. Meadows acknowledged that the NCI could have obtained the biopsy records in question. You see, but he said doing so would constitute an investigation, which was not authorized to conduct without the prerequisite records. It was a textbook case of bureaucratic catch-22. You see, this is what this is about. They're going to try to find him, get him on some legal way of destroying him. When Hoxsey called his panoplies of cures to the stand, the prosecution once more objectively to omitting the testimony of lay people. Judge Atwell overruled yet again and permitted the witnesses to describe their dramatic recoveries. The Hoxsey defense vigorously attacked the limitations of conventional cancer treatments. At the time, the American Cancer Society was claiming about 32%, that is 5-year survival rate, using conventional treatments. However, as local treatments, surgery and radiation treatments could be applied to only about 25% of cancers. These all, I'm not naming the footnotes. There are plenty of footnotes in this particular book too. Okay, and I can't go through all this. You have to buy the book. Okay, after 6 days of testimony, Judge Atwell retired to his chambers, returning the next afternoon to an overflowing courtroom to present his findings of fact and conclusion of law. This time, the judge did not sidestep passing judgment on the efficacy of Hoxsey's medicines. He found that the respondent's treatment is not injurious. Some it cures and some it does not cure, and some it relieves somewhat. That respondents do not guarantee to cure. That the percentage of efficiency and beneficial treatment by respondents is reasonable comparable to the efficiency and success of surgery and radium, and without the physical suffering and dire consequences of radium, if improperly administered, and surgery is not successful in completely removing the entire malignant portion. Judge Atwell declared Hoxsey not guilty of false and misleading labeling, etc., because he did have a real cure, though not a cure-all. The bursting courtroom exploded in pandemonium, and the judge seemed to be banging a silent gavel amid the dent of Hoxsey's triumph over the government. With his cure validated for a second time by a federal court, Hoxsey was on a roll. But the AMA Journal struck back instantly with an editorial headline commented on court opinion that internal cancer can be cured by medicine. The editorial decried the omission of the lay testimony of patients and called for immediate appeal. The government appeal took place without a jury, you see, in November of 1951 in the 5th U.S. Circuit Court in Fort Worth. It was handled as a kind of modern star chamber in which the case was basically solely on the prior trial record. No witnesses or further testimony were allowed. See, they're not going to allow him to do this again. In a rare judicial upset, the higher court reversed Judge Atwell's pointedly handing down its verdict in the middle of Hoxsey's second trial against Dr. Fishbein in the summer of '52. The court opinion adhered to the AMA's position that lay witnesses were unqualified to testify regarding cancer and entirely eliminated their testimony from consideration. The court found the evidence as a whole does not support the findings of the trial, that some it cures and some it does not cure, and some it relieves somewhat. The ruling stated qualified experts recognize in the treatment of internal cancer only the methods of surgery, X-ray, and radium, and some of the radioactive byproducts of atomic bomb production. This is so evilly, though the ghastly truth is that these methods frequently fail and are in many cases themselves unsatisfied. But it is true, nevertheless, that with present enlightenment, they are our sole defense against the scourge of cancer. The court ordered Judge Atwell to issue an injunction against Hoxsey's interstate shipment of medicines. Atwell was outraged, having been reversed but twice in his 27 years on his bench. The two sides met to work out a deal. Government lawyers provided Judge Atwell with a proposal injunction, while Hoxsey's lawyers countered with an alternate agreeing as an injunction with explanatory language containing appropriate qualifying statements revealing the conflict of medical opinion as to the truth of such representation. In other words, there was a legitimate difference of medical viewpoints to be represented as such on the labeling. This is what they do today, folks. The amended language fit the original purpose of Congress in charting the FDA in full knowledge that such disagreements are common in medicine. The founding legislators' real intent was to prevent competing medical factions from skewing the law to their own ideology biased to the disadvantage of the public health. An irritated Judge Atwell considered the dilemma. There is nothing to do here but to prepare a judgment, he said, and the one submitted by the government is a little too broad. I think the other, Hoxsey's judgment, covers it all right. You gentlemen have had a hard time agreeing, and I have signed this order. If you don't like it, you know what you can do with it. Judge Atwell signed the decree using Hoxsey's language, allowing for difference of medical opinion on the tonic. In an unusual move skirting normal judicial boundaries, the higher court retaliated with a writ unanimous, flatly commanding Judge Atwell to sign the government more restrictive decree. The court said it had ruled that claims that Hoxsey's medicines will cure cancers are false, in fact, thus leaving no room for asserted differences of medical opinion. Atwell still resisted and was severely castigated by the higher court. Left with no other choice, a limited Judge Atwell signed the government injunction. Hoxsey's appeal was denied. NCI Director Dr. J.R. Heller sent a prompt thank you letter to the Commissioner of the FDA. The FDA was now deliberately using the courts to settle medical questions, folks. In politicizing a legitimate difference of medical opinion, a disagreement whose rightful resolution is in a laboratory or clinic, the act also initiated a crucial stratagem that the FDA would continue to employ up to the present day of using labeling laws to restrict or ban treatments not conforming to their orthodox views. So they've become the all-powerful people here, you see. They are a part of government. This is not their business, folks, but they've been given an office in government. The ruling amounted to a gag order on one of the loudest mouths around. Hossie was forced to jettison his literature and stop shipping medicines to 10 states where doctors were administering the Hossie treatment. Do you understand what's going on here, folks? So he was operating now in 10 states. He was basically shipping his formula out, and other doctors were using it. All patients would now be compelled to travel to Dallas to get their remedies by prescription from the clinic. But when the FDA sent agents to Dallas to inspect the clinic in 1954, they found Hossie unrepentant. We were invited quite graciously in his office, wrote Inspector Premier. We were notified by Hossie that he had nothing to hide and wished to cooperate with us in every way. Hossie was quite irritated in his conversation as he would divert the subject time and time again about his recent oil strikes that were bringing him in millions. Hossie began his usual story of how he welcomed any investigation. Hossie launched into quite an animated spiel of how he was helping mankind, how the profit motive had never entered in his mind, how he had cured thousands of cancer cases, given up as hopeless by the medical practitioners, how I intended to do so in the face of all the difficulty until they lay me out on a slab or bring me in the militia, as that is the only way he could be prevented from operating. Hossie bragged to the FDA agents about his latest suitors. Dictator Juan Perón of Argentina, as well as the Mexican governments, were interested in his treatment. Mexican doctors from the National College of Medicine in Mexico City had spent time at his clinic, and an article in the mainstream Mexican newspaper had caused an avalanche of interest south of the border, resulting in his use as the Mexican Army Hospital and at 3 clinics under the Mexican Surgeon General. When he completed pending arrangements to transfer the clinic into a nonprofit foundation, he boasted the country's richest man, H.L. Hunt, would be joining his board of directors, along with other powerful people, including Tom Braniff, founder of Braniff Airlines. The FDA closed this report in the meeting by saying Hossie would defy any attempts made to prevent the distribution of the treatment in spite of the injunction. With his added wealth and influence, his egomaniac has become more uncontrollable than before as possible. Boasted by the federal court's victory, the AMA published a point editorial suggests that Texas authorities now needed to take care of business in their own backyard. But while organized medicine moved to start tightening the noose around Dallas, Harry Hossie was fastening a diamond pin on his necktie and mapping expansion plans. Hossie's continued implacably pursuing every available avenue for an investigation and found several takers. In 1951, Senator William Langer of North Dakota visited the Dallas clinic and took patients' testimony. After studying the FDA trial records, Langer introduced 2 resolutions in the U.S. Senate, first calling for an investigation of Hossie and the second for a broader investigation of any clinic or hospital in existence for 10 years treating pathological proven cases of cancer. Both resolutions were stifled in committee, so he didn't get what he wanted. So another investigation was in the works, which was to Dr. L.T. Coggenshaw, a highly respected Chicago doctor and dean of the Division of Biological Sciences at the University of Chicago Medical School, had been contacted by local Hossie's patients seeking his attention about the alleged cure of his son. Dr. Coggenshaw in turn called the American Cancer Society, which encouraged him to go to Dallas and report back. Dr. Coggenshaw agreed conditionally if Dr. Andrew C. Ivy would accompany him because of his prominence in the National Cancer Program. As vice president of the University of Illinois and the head of his medical school, the largest in the country, Dr. Ivy was among the most venerated cancer researchers in the nation. He was former executive director of the elite National Advisor Cancer Council at the NCI and former board member of the American Cancer Society. The organizer of the Naval Medical Research Institute, he had presided on behalf of the United States at the Nuremberg trials on the question of medical ethics at the recommendation of the AMA itself. As a committed cancer man, Dr. Ivy agreed to join Dr. Coggenshaw to look over the clinic. Dr. Coggenshaw also wanted Dr. Ivy along because he was trying to immunize himself against the contagious controversy surrounding Hossie. When Oliver Field, director of the AMA Bureau of Investigation, first caught wind in 1948 that esteemed Chicago doctor was considering investigation in Hoxsey Clinic, he wrote, "I advised him that he would get himself in trouble." Okay, so here we go. Dr. Kotshaw understood that venturing to Dallas was a perilous act, even for a top figure in medicine. So these guys are sticking their necks out, okay? Dr. Ivy and Kotshaw arrived at the clinic on February 10, 1949, and met with Dr. Durkee, who explained the remedies and freely discussed their constituents. He concealed that poor or no records had been kept until his arrival, and their investigation of various cases left them unimpressed. We told Mr. Hoxsey that we had seen nothing which convinced us that any internal cancers or metastases had been cured. Dr. Ivy later wrote, and that we were not partially interested in the results of treatment of skin cancers with escarlius, because we knew that they worked in some cases that by radiology and surgery 95% could be cured. Dr. Ivy concluded that Hoxsey's reputed cures were either cases of wrong diagnosis or the result of delayed reaction to conventional treatment. Nevertheless, Dr. Ivy strongly recommended the American Cancer Society conduct a formal investigation. He observed that Hoxsey's business quite obviously improves on high-grade opposition, since it seems to cause some patients and some prominent laypersons to believe that Mr. Hoxsey is being persecuted. It would be an interesting experience to try a new approach to test and prove early the truth and falsity of an alleged cancer cure, and the way attempted to prevent the exploitation of the cancer patient. Dr. Kotshaw concurred there is absolutely no way to determine whether he has anything of merit other than by carefully supervised study in his clinic. In my opinion, Mr. Hoxsey is a very clever man. He seems genuinely interested in having his method of treatment evaluated by experts and was completely willing to show the records of every case, including failures, as part of the terms. Dr. Ivy obtained Hoxsey's firm agreement not to advertise any tests that might be arranged. This strong prompting by the eminent doctors did not lead to an investigation, but Dr. Ivy soon found himself embroiled in his own controversy. If he was suspicious of Hoxsey's tall tales of persecution, he was about to get a crash course in medical politics that would derail his career and test his faith in the medical institution he dearly loved and himself helped build. Dr. Ivy had been fascinated with cancer since the earliest medical education, first developing a theory about it as a graduate student in 1917 at the University of Chicago. He suspected that the decreased resistance or deficiency of some sort in the body led to the disease development. He concentrated his research on a natural substance in the liver that might inhibit the growth of the disease. He was approached in 1950 by another scientist working along similar lines, Dr. Stefan Duravio, a Yugoslavian researcher who had immigrated to Argentina, conducted experiments there with government support, isolated an immune-boosting natural substance. Dr. Duravili injected horses with actinomyces, actinomyces, the organism that causes lumpy jaw, a cancer-like disease in animals in hopes of stimulating their bodies to produce an immune reaction. He then extracted what he believed was the immune-boosting factor from the blood. Dr. Ivy worked quietly with Dr. Dubier at the University of Illinois Medical School and in private Chicago hospital for 18 months, testing what they called KRE biosine. On March 26, 1951, Dr. Ivy held a press conference at the Drake Hotel before 100 scientists, physicians, and researchers in Chicago to discuss biosine as a possible agent for a new cancer drug. He related the observations on 22 cancer cases that were terminal when biosine was given to them. 14 were still alive, and 2 no longer had any evidence of the disease. Always faticiously conservative in his projection, he was adamant in making no claims for the drug. It is my opinion, Dr. Ivy wrote in the press release, inviting the select medical group to review his data, that the substance merits a thorough clinical study and evaluation since I believe it shows much promise in the management of cancer patients. To the electrified gathering, he circumspectly stated, biosine is not to be viewed as a final goal in chemotherapy of cancer, but I believe it's an important step in that direction. I could hardly believe my eyes when measurements showed an effect on humans sometimes in 24 hours. Dr. Ivy was immediately discredited by the medical profession. He was suspended by the Chicago Medical Society for 3 months for using a worthless drug for cancer. He was stripped of his post as vice president of the University of Illinois and voluntarily resigned from the American Medical Association. Incredibly, he found himself cast down from the acme of his profession. Yet there were other, more disturbing circumstances besides outright intellectual suppression. And like Hoxie, Dr. Ivy now charged a conspiracy. The Illinois legislature in 1953 appointed a commission to determine whether there was a conspiracy against Biozine and its sponsors. The target of the most alarming accusation was Dr. J.J. Moore, treasurer of the AMA and a prominent Chicago pathologist. Dr. Durvey and Dr. Ivy alleged that Dr. Moore approached them with an offer for $2.5 million for the drug distribution rights for 2 businessmen, associate of Dr. Moore. Dr. Ivy and his advised Dr. Moore that he first needed to complete his testing. If Biozine proved effectively, Dr. Ivy told him he then planned to offer the drug non-exclusively in commerce to prevent price gouging. He contended that his refusal resulted in Dr. Moore's threat to destroy Biozine and ruin both him and Dr. Durvey through his influence with the AMA and the university. Wow. An article derogatory to Biozine quickly surfaced in the AMA journal. Here we go again. Asserting that 98 of the 100 Biozine patients had died. Its claim was quickly repudiated when 10 patients turned dead or dying wrote letters to Biozine investigating committee certifying they were alive and well. Dr. Ivy charged that his records had been deliberately falsified. Up to their old tricks again. Senator Paul Douglas of Illinois headed up the legislative inquiry, which found that the FDA reports attacking Biozine were based on unfair, inadequate, and prejudiced statements. At a press conference, Senator Douglas commented medical people are highly conservative and the pundits in medicine. Medical politicians do not like invocation, you see. So he's pointing out the key fact here. There are a lot of other circumstances here in this particular Biozine case which may implicate the American Medical Association itself, but I shall not mention them. I merely say that this is too important a subject to be left purely to medical politicians. The similarity of Dr. Ivy's charges to those of Hoxie was unmistakably a failed attempt by AMA official to buy his formula, followed by blackballing and refusing to test the therapy, where Hoxie fit the image of a quack. Dr. Ivy surely did not. By echoing the allegations of conspiracy and dirty deeds, Dr. Ivy gave weight to Hoxie's seemingly incredible story. After Dr. Ivy got started with Biozine, recalled Mildred Nelson, they almost buried him. He called Harry. I was in the office when they called for outside help came in. What do you do? Dr. Ivy asked, how can I get out of this and so I can go on? As soon as Harry got off the phone, he said, Mildred, make me a reservation for Chicago. Man, this is unbelievable. I've got to help Dr. Ivy. And Harry flies to Chicago to help him. What a saint, folks. What a fucking saint. Thousands of patients anxiously sought to obtain Biozine while thousands of doctors prescribed it as they investigated the new drug. Dr. Ivy waged a bitter battle for the next 13 years against the AMA and FDA to get a fair test and combat criminal charges brought against him, Dr. Bury, and other associates. Hoxie and Dr. Ivy, however, were far from the only ones to land on organized medicine's index for their pursuit of alternate approaches to cancer. You see, this is all, you got to understand this, folks. You got to understand this. Let's get to the point here. Let's make it sure. There are only 3 ways they've been using this crap, okay? They either cut in on you and try to get rid of the cancer. They either use radiation or they use chemotherapy. They've been using this for over nearly 100 years. Okay? Nothing new under the sun. And they weren't about to allow anything else to get in their way. You see, this is money making, folks. This is money. This is what it's about. So even though Dr. Ivy's not in the so-called with Hoxie, basically he needed help because frankly he was going to be destroyed. They were going to destroy him. Let's see what happens here, okay? Hoxie and Dr. Ivy, however, were far from the only ones to land on organized medicine index for the pursuit of alternate approaches of cancer. Serial condemnation over the course of the century left a trail of shattered careers and untested therapies. Prominently among them was William Frederick Koch, K-O-C-H, M.D., Ph.D., a reputable laboratory scientist and professor of physiology at the Detroit College of Medicine. Dr. Koch built on the similar discovery of Dr. Otto Warburg. Very incredible person here. Listen to me. Dr. Otto Warburg in the early 20th century that cancer arises as an anaerobia condition in the absence of deficiency of oxygen. He believed that the chemistry of natural immunity in the body is able to destroy the toxicity of germs, hypothesized that is a hypothesis, that the body oxidation mechanism is the key to burning off excessive poisons. He devised two injectable drugs that were called glyoxide, spelled Glyoxilide, and benzoquinone. I'll just spell it for you. Zoquinone. That's benzoquinone. Synthetic antioxidant that he conjectured acts as an oxidation catalyst to help the body both build cell tissue and burn up waste products. He also believed strongly in the importance of diet and intestinal cleansing. When another practitioner applied his work to human patients, the drugs showed impressive results not only in cancer, but also in tuberculosis and other diseases. Dr. Koch's work was highly praised in the AMA Journal editorial in 1913. And then in 1919, after he claimed to treat 8 cancer cases successful, that is treat 8 cancer cases successful while simultaneously criticizing surgery and radiation, the ill-fated tests ensued before the Wayne County Cancer Committee, composed of surgeons and radiologists. They're going to jump on this guy too and destroy him, and was terminated before his completion. Dr. Cramp of the AMA Propaganda Department called for immediate end to any such efforts. You see, this is the tool, folks. You're not going to help people. This is a killing machine. This is what this is, folks. I'm just stating it like it is. It's the truth. You need to hear it. Dr. Koch also maintained that he was approached by business interests closely allied with organized medicine with an offer for the rights to his drugs. Refusing, he was demonized. You see, they want the drug, they're going to buy it, and they're not going to use it. They're never going to use it, folks. That's the whole idea. Eliminate it. Which is what a doctor would always want to do. Yes, I want to see it work. That's what if it's a true doctor. Refusing, he was demonized, and doctors associated with him were expelled from medical societies or lost their license. Dr. A.R. Mitchell, chairman of the board of trustees of the AMA, and supporter of Dr. Koch, advised the researchers against any further publication in order to safeguard his formulas and methods. So what's going on here, folks? The AMA is enormously powerful, and basically, you stand out and say you're going to try to help something, guess what? They'll destroy you. They've done it before. Because Dr. Koch had never bothered to conduct the requisitioned animal studies with his drugs, the remedies were distributed widely through Canadian stockmen and cattlemen in British Columbia to attain documentation. Cattlemen in Brazil also took a strong interest. As a pragmatic ranchers seeking tangible results, they were impervious to medical ideology. For over 20 years, the veterinary community carried out dramatic cures with Koch's remedies on animals with cancers, tumors, and other afflictions, keeping careful data. Doctors across the United States continued to use the preparation on people and also claimed to impressive results in a broad array of diseases. Tests in Mexico and Brazil included success with leprosy and dementia. While conducting experiments with human beings in Brazil in 1941, Koch alleged he angered a representative of Park Davis Pharmaceutical Company with his successes. Dr. Koch shortly received a communication from the FDA regarding problems with his labeling. He cut short his trip and voluntarily returned to the United States to clear the matter up. He was immediately arrested. Hear me. He was immediately arrested upon his arrival in Miami and jailed in April of 1942. He was already seen as, we're going to nail you, baby. We're going to nail you. This is what's going on here, folks, on FDA charges of false labeling, a case for which Dr. Fishbein took personal credit. Remember, Dr. Fishbein is still involved. This is going back in history here, okay? The FDA, Wallace Janssen, reflected the government's view when he quoted a federal prosecutor on the Koch remedies, which were highly diluted and contained only fractional amounts of the active ingredient. This dilution was like dumping a cocktail into the Detroit River and expecting to get a kick from the water flowing over in Niagara Falls. After 5 months, the jury set Dr. Koch free. In 1948, he faced new charges ending in a mistrial. During the trials, he was supported actively by William Merrill Dow, DOW, and Dr. Charles Hale, HLLE, founders of Dow Chemical Company, who provided a 1,000-page scientific testimony document the success of Koch's cancer remedy. Dr. Hale called Dr. Koch a modern pasteur. Well, I don't know if I would call him a pasteur. So government attorneys dropped the charges in 1948 amid a national controversy in which Dr. Koch, a devout Christian, had now gained widespread public support as well as a representative of the Christian Medical Research League, a large national nonprofit foundation to which Koch donated his formulas. Senator William Langdon, again, Langer, supported him in Congress to no avail. Amid rumors of another aggressive government case in the works, Dr. Koch expatriated to Brazil in disgust. A permanent FDA injunction against the Koch remedies was granted in 1950, and a succession of doctors among the estimated 2,000 daring to use the therapy lost their license. See, the government's got involved in what they shouldn't have got involved, folks. They got involved. They're being paid off already in 1950. In fact, before that. Years later, Nobel laureate Dr. Albert Sins, I can't pronounce him, apparently he's Swiss, Georgyi, who developed the free radical theory of cancer with Dr. Linus Pauling, credited Dr. Koch as a similar precursor of his work. Mildred Nelson visited Dr. Koch in Brazil in the early 1960s and recalled being stumped by his biochemical erudition. By the early 1950s, the Hoxsey Clinic accommodated patients who requested both the Koch remedies and the Creolbiazine. Meanwhile, outside of Boston and Medford, Massachusetts, Dr. Robert E. Lincoln was making another discovery. An obscure general practitioner research scientist, he had conducted research at Harvard Laboratory of Applied Physics on supersonic energy in medicine and invented a celebrated mechanical heart pump during his tenure there. When Dr. Lincoln took an interest in studying the germ Staphylococcus aureus that causes infection, he fell across two strains of a virus that he believed attacked and killed the harmful bacterium. I'll say that again. The name of the germ was Staphylococcus aureus, aureus. He believed and attacked and killed the harmful bacterium. He started administrating these two bacteriotes, that is, bacterial killers, to treat sinuses and grip, GRIPPE, and got apparent cures in an astounding 95% of the cases. Serendipitously, he noticed that the treatment seemed to clear up a variety of secondary conditions, including arthritis, angina, deafness, and blindness. Also among these were cancer, and his clinic was soon overrun with desperate cancer patients. A modest man, Dr. Lincoln said there was nothing new about his method except the therapy itself. He sought to destroy the bacterial host for viruses in the body by using a virus developed to extreme potency. The application itself was simple. Patients sat in a chair and breathed the strains through a tube. Dr. Lincoln charged from $1 to $5 and set charity cases free. He set up a nonprofit, Lincoln Foundation, to dispense the therapy. It should have been great news, but his woes had already begun several years earlier. You see, they can't have this shit, you see. The AMA journey, you got to understand what's going on here, folks. These people are not going to give you a cure. They're not. It's all about fucking money and prestige. The AMA Journal first rejected Dr. Lincoln's 1946 paper detailing clinical cases history. When he resubmitted them in 1948 on the New England Journal of Medicine, it was declined for lack of space. What's lack of space? Well, there was room in the publication for an article on the vitamin D contents of mare's milk. Dr. Lincoln's invited a research committee from a large Boston hospital to study his work and was snubbed. You see what is going on? This is conspiracy themselves. They conspired from themselves that he couldn't get any way himself. I'm not agreeing with what he's doing here, but he's actually trying to set the record straight that he's helping people, and he's not charging anything hardly at all for it. This is about what we call they conspire together to protect one another. And I can't think of the name. It'll come to me. Anyway, so they snubbed him. In 1949, he contacted the Massachusetts Medical Society, requesting meetings which were scheduled and then indefinitely postponed. The society, meanwhile, sent out derogative letters in response to queries about the treatment. By 1949, the president of AMA flatly refused to assist Dr. Lincoln in his efforts to publish. Among Dr. Lincoln's cancer patients was Charles Tobey Jr., that's spelled T-O-B-E-Y, Jr., who experienced a complete remission. The patient's father was Senator Charles Tobey Sr. of New Hampshire, who became impatient over the apparent neglect of Dr. Lincoln's work. The legislator used his clout to demand a formal investigation by the Veteran Administration. A month later, the Veteran Administration responded to the National Research Council. Decision-making body, the NCI, opposed such a test. The senator went directly to the NRC and demanded an investigation. The NRC deflected it back to the Massachusetts Medical Society. Despite an angry meeting in the senator's office, the federal agency insisted on deferring the important investigation to the meddling state society. We're not getting to you see, even other people trying to do what's right here, they're being stonewalled. The Massachusetts Medical Society set about its investigation by sending doctors to interview Lincoln's patients on the back porch of the physician's home. Society representatives made another visit a month later and promised a hospital study, which never materialized. It's all playing games here. Subsequently, the supply of Lincoln's antibiotics were severed by the labs of Boston University Medical School, where they were manufactured. 6 weeks later, when the supply resumed, Dr. Lincoln discovered suspicions that his original strain was not present in the drugs. Holy shit. He had wisely retained cultures of the strain and was able to reconstruct the medicines. In March 1952, after 8 months of study, the Massachusetts Medical Society released its report rejecting Lincoln's method. It attributed the cure of Charles Tobey Jr. to prior surgery and radiation. It stated that equal beneficial results from X-ray and surgical retreatments in this disease have been reported on patients who did not receive Dr. Lincoln's treatment. The Medical Society exclusively advocated surgery and radiation as a treatment of choice. So they rejected his whole idea of the bacteriology discovery. So you see other people are biting the dust here. After Dr. Lincoln, this is AMA with Dr. You-know-who. Dr. Lincoln criticized the high degree of stupidity that has been maintained by the segment of AMA. The Medical Society demanded his resignation. After his refusal, he was expelled in April 1952. Senator Tobey, enraged over the seeming suppression of Dr. Lincoln's work, brought the matter before the Senate, where the highly visible debauchery was generating sweaty pressure. Now familiar with a larger pattern of repression around the unconventional cancer treatments, he opted for drastic action. As head of the Senate Interstate and Foreign Commerce Committee, Senator Tobey secretly hired a young Justice Department lawyer, Benedict Fitzgerald, to conduct a covert investigation of possible suppression of unconventional cancer therapies. A graduate of Boston University Law School, Fitzgerald had a background as a tough investigator, trying federal malpractice cases both for and against doctors, having also served in 1950 as a chief counsel to the chairman of the House Committee to investigate lobbying activities. He knew that the AMA was the biggest lobby in the nation's capital. Well schooled in the inner workings of the hardball Washington politics, Fitzgerald began scouring the country, interviewing Dr. Lincoln, Dr. Ivy, Harry Hoxsey, and a half a dozen other similar individuals. He also appeared in the recesses of organized medicine's own war on cancer, but cautiously avoided letting the AMA know what he was up to. Fitzgerald secretly passes through the underbelly of the cancer politics led him to produce an explosive expose for the Senate committee titled A Conspiracy Against the Health of the American People. Its focus in depth was on Harry Hoxsey and on Dr. Andrew C. Ivy, while naming a raft of other cancer and treatments systematically sunk by organized medicine without fair investigation. Fitzgerald affirmed Hoxsey's court victories and noted Judge Judge Atwell's decision that the Hoxsey treatments were in some way superior to X-ray, radium, and surgery, and do have therapeutic curative merit. Specifically, Hoxsey's patients witnessed by name and address, he stated, is determined by pathology in a great many instances by laboratories, wholly discounted from the Hoxsey Cancer Clinic that they were suffering from different types of cancer, both internal and external. And following treatments, they testified they were cured. After scrupulous detective work, Fitzgerald confirmed the validity of Hoxsey's records of reputed cures. Fitzgerald then examined Hoxsey's failed attempts at a federal investigation. No such investigation was made. In fact, every effort was made to avoid and evade the investigation by the Surgeon General office. The record will reveal that this clinic did furnish 62 complete case histories, including pathology, name of hospitals and physicians, etc. in 1945. And again in June 1950, 77 case histories, which included the names of the patient's pathological reports in many instances, and the absence thereof, the name of the pathologist, hospital, and the physicians who had treated these patients for being treated at the Hoxsey Cancer Clinic. The Council of the National Cancer Institute, without investigation, in October 1950, refused to order an investigation. The record in the federal court discloses that this agency of the federal government took sides. They took sides, folks, and sought in every way to hinder, suppress, and restrict this institution in their treatment of cancer. They were bribed. Turn his attention to the case. What do you think's going on now, folks? What do you think's going on? This is 70 years ago. What the fuck are you doing up there? If you can't do what's right, get the hell out of Washington, D.C. Money has a real bad deal, doesn't it? Turn his attention to the case of Dr. Ivy, Fitzgerald wrote, there is reason to believe that the AMA has been hasty, capricious, arbitrary, and outright dishonest in alleged machinations of Dr. J.J. Moore for the past 10 years treasurer of the AMA could involve the AMA in an interstate conspiracy of alarming proportions. It is my profound conviction, that is Mr. Fitzgerald's continued, that crifbazine is one of the most promising materials yet isolated from the management of cancer. It is biologically active. The substance and the theory behind it deserves the most full and complete scientific study. Dr. Andrew C. Ivy is absolutely honest, intellectual, scientific, and in every other way. Moreover, he appears to be one of the most competent and unbiased cancer experts that I have ever come in contact with. Behind all this is the weirdest conglomeration of corrupt motives, intrigue, selfishness, jealousy, obstruction, and conspiracy I have ever seen. Fitzgerald also saw that the Lincoln treatment fitted the same obvious pattern of obstruction. The government investigator summarized his report by concluding my investigation to date should convince the committee that a conspiracy does exist to stop this free flow and use of drugs in interstate commerce, which allegedly have therapeutic value. Public and private funds have been thrown around like confetti at a country fair to close up and destroy clinics, hospitals, and scientific research laboratories which do not conform to the viewpoint of the Medical Association. These people are fucking liars. How many people have died for this stupid shit? All because of fucking money. Fitzgerald further directed severe criticism of the limitation of surgery, x-rays, and radium. He cited the radical difference of opinion within the medical profession itself as to both their utility and harm. He demanded the investigation and abuse of the AMA seal of acceptance. I duly noted the organization's previous conviction on conspiracy charges. His far-reaching probe turned up a morass of corrupt medical politics infiltrating the highest office in the land. Fitzgerald's conclusion of the wide-ranging conspiracy implying that the AMA, the FDA, NCI, and Surgeon General affirmed the allegations of Hoxsey, Dr. Ivy, and the others. The report lit a fuse that was about to explode in the halls of Congress when Senator Tobey died suddenly of a heart ailment. Taking over the Interstate Commerce Committee was Ohio Senator John Brickley, dubbed Mr. AMA in the Senate. Holy shit. You see, because the report's existence had been kept entirely secret, Brickley only learned of it indirectly from Fitzgerald. The investigator alleged that Senator Brickley told him to file just a brief report and offer him a good job he would be low and not talk to the press. Fitzgerald submitted the report nonetheless, which was inserted into the congressional record in August of 1953. Senator Brinkley immediately decreed the report not within the jurisdiction of the committee and snuffed it. 2 weeks later, Fitzgerald was relieved of his job at the Justice Department, while Senator Bricker, another fucking shitbutt, was guest speaker at the next AMA convention. Do you understand what kind of people these people are? They're not people. They're not even human. Do you know how many people have died for this fucking shit? Lying bastards. Oliver Field, director of the AMA Bureau of Investigation, penned an anger letter to the Oregon doctor about Fitzgerald's tactics. It's obvious, complained the AMA official who never visited Hoxie Clinic, that Mr. Fitzgerald engaged in a rather peculiar stunt of having investigated the American Medical Association without coming anywhere near it. With support from Charles Tobey Jr., Fitzgerald appealed to Senator William Langer, head of the Senate Judicial Committee, whose 2 earlier resolutions to the Senate to investigate Hoxie and other alternate cancer treatment had already been smothered in committee. In a lengthy letter to Senator Langley, you know, people need to know this shit, folks. They need to know this right now. 70 years later, Fitzgerald reiterated his finding of a giant conspiracy and revisit allegations Hoxie had long ago made. From the evidence I have gathered, Fitzgerald wrote, it appears that as early as 1924, the Hoxie method of treating cancer was considered so effective by a former president of the medical association that he personally presented his sponsors with a written proposal, which, among other things, provided for the enlistment of valuable property rights in the Hoxie method and medicines and formulate to the same official. The evidence indicates that when the proposition was spurned, Hoxie was advised to sign and accept the proposal or face ruination. Such tactics is true. Constitute blackmail of the rankest order, and this evidence should be examined closely to ascertain its credibility. Fitzgerald has seen enough of the seemly side of organized medicine to conclude that both Hoxie and Dr. Ivy might well be telling the truth. Fitzgerald closed by noting that the prisoner's dilemma he suddenly found himself confronting. The fact that various agencies of the federal government are manned by officials who are also active in medical association required a consideration as to whether or not these officials are directing their first allegiance to the citizens or citizens and government of America or to these same medical associations. Besides its obscured insertion in the congressional record, Fitzgerald report did manage to reach many citizens through energetic distribution by advocates including Charles Tobey Jr., who printed 22,000 copies and began disseminating them nationally in his crusade against the Un-American Medical Association. He personally canvassed the 389 doctors of his hometown, Concord, New Hampshire, to visit Dr. Lincoln and review his reputed 5,000 cured patients. Not one replied, although the state medical association did ask him for copies of any future correspondence. Don't you see what's going on here? Don't you understand this happened 70 years ago? Don't you see what's going on here now, in the last 3 years of our country? The sole doctor in Concord, New Hampshire, who braved testing the remedy, who warned that he would face immediate removal of his license and quit the pursuit. Tobey attended a public meeting that Senator Brinkley held with high cancer officials where both Dr. Ivy and Dr. Lincoln were in the audience. The floor refused to recognize Tobey, and the official threatened to walk out if he persisted in interrupting. There would be no dialogue on the matter. Along with Hoxie, practitioners such as Ivy, Koch, and Lincoln, most of them respected medical men prior to their transgressions, were pointing to a new therapeutic direction for cancer. Immunology. Your immune system, folks. Their theories would not be embraced by mainstream medicine for over 30 years. In 1953, a dark wind of extreme political polarization was sweeping through the nation's capital. Senator Joseph McCarthy was gearing up the community with that witch hunt, a mentality easily extended to quacks. Anti-cancer ideology became an article of scientific faith, wrote Alex Jack. Disease was the irrational attack, viral, bacterial, or undefinable conspiracy subservient to the human body, which must be hunted down and rooted out, whatever the cost. Clearly, there was no room for differences of medicine medical opinion. Benedict Fitzgerald went on to become an attorney for various unauthorized cancer practitioners, including Harry Hoxsey. Among other cases, he managed to free a Maine doctor from an insane asylum where he had been committed without having had legal counsel for administrating the Koch remedy in his practice. Holy shit, folks. How deep do we go? The message was clear. A doctor offering alternative cancer therapies had to be crazy. And that's what they do to you, folks, when you speak the truth. They think you're crazy. We live in an upside down world, folks. We don't live in a truth world. We must stand against the evil. The Fitzgerald report exploded organized medicine dubious refusal to investigate unconventional cancer therapies. Fitzgerald disturbing charges would continue to reverberate for decades to come in serial scandal displaying a similar pattern. Hoxsey's charge of a medical conspiracy could no longer be discounted as a publicity ploy of the lone crank. By 1954, even the straight Yale Law Journal would publicly criticize the AMA monopolistic practices against the course of protests rising across the country from credible doctors, senators, and federal officials. Harry Hoxsey pumped up the volume. And with that, that's the end of chapter 7. I don't know, folks, if you don't understand, this took place 70 years ago. You think that you're going to get a chance in court these days, good luck, because frankly, it's gotten worse, you see. And it's sad. It's really sad. So I am pointing out here the truth here, trying to share from other people, if you will have ears to hear and eyes to see, that what they've been doing has been for over 70 years, folks. There was a legitimate way of dealing with cancer, and the AMA refused to, and the government went along with it. Their hands are filled with blood, folks, with blood. It's time for some fucking justice. You understand? Yeah, I'm a little upset. When you read things like this, it should stir your blood. And that's why it's called righteous anger. If you peeled, it doesn't affect you and doesn't have effect upon your life and what's going on here, folks, then something fucking's wrong with you. You're sick. You don't stand. You let it go on. You wonder why things are getting worse because you're consenting. Thank you for listening. I hope and pray that you will see the truth. If you have that desire to see it, you will see it. But if you don't, you won't find it. Thank you. You take care.